Okay, well, good session, guys. I know some of you are going to be heading off as I'm doing this, which is great. It's good to see you. Good to see so many of you in the Sunday prep session. Let's just do a little review of the indices from where we were last time I had a look at this, because we looked at the Dow and S&P after we'd seen this move down, and we had a little bit of a recovery. And one of the things I was saying was, for me, I was looking at the recovery. You can see from a daily perspective, we have the move down. We got to close below the 50, and we got to close below the 100 in the same day. We bounced off MS2. We opened. We went even further down, and we had that big retracement that you can see here, and really got back and was testing about a 50% area within that move that you can see there. So we've come back and tested the daily 50. All right, so come back, tested the daily 50, come up to this level here, and then as a result of that, hold on guys, sorry. So as a result of that, I've come up to the 50, haven't closed above the daily 50. Now what I want to do is I want to have a look at the S&P, just see what that's done. Similar thing. So we've had this test of the daily 50, and we've had a retest of the lows and a bounce again. So at the moment, we're not making up our mind clearly from a daily perspective. You can see that. Can't get above the daily 50, which would suggest potentially a move back up towards the highs. And as yet, we got below that low, but a little dicey one there on Friday. So that's a retest of those lows, pretty much on the Dow and S&P futures you can see here. That's the DAX. We'll come to the DAX in a little bit. So we've come back, almost had the test on the S&P. How does that look from a weekly basis? Well, you'll see there the weekly candle, which I think you've got to pay a little bit more attention to in this scenario. The weekly candle, as yet, still not had a close below the futures 21 moving average. Very close, but the week, you can see there, as a summary of the week, we've essentially recovered. We opened here, if you know how to look at a candle, opened here, came all the way down here and closed there. So about a 50% retracement. So a fair bit going on there. If I look at the S&P and just pull the S&P up, not quite as much. So the S&P has had a close below its 21 moving average on the futures. So for me, it's all about these lows now. Are we going to take these lows out? These two major weeks, if we take these lows out, the 50's close by. There's no real support and resistance there. If I look at the Dow for comparison, yeah, we take these lows out, the 50's close by again. So what I'm going to be doing is watching to see if we take the lows out of this week, because there's been two tests on the daily, as we've already seen, and that's my alert. Now remember, I don't trade these markets extensively. I'm looking at the forex markets, but a break of those lows could suggest a test of the 50, could suggest a test here of that weekly trend line on the S&P, as well as the weekly trend line down here on the Dow. And that could bring some volatility into the market, and that's something to bear in mind. All right, so it's all about the lows from this week's candle. We obviously took the prior week's candle lows out. Now I'm looking at those. In terms of the DAX, we've obviously discussed potential trades here from a strategic point of view, but if I'm looking at it from an overall analysis point of view, looking at the DAX, it's a similar thing. Right, this double top, two big weeks down, two big candles closing down. So again, for me, it's these lows. If we take these lows out, will support hold out, or will we go below MS3 on the pivots and below the lows of August? If that's the case, then we could be seeing some free fall, and there could be some short opportunities for us on the strategies that we trade on the lower time frames. So going into the daily, going into the 4-hourly, with some pullback potentials if we can get those new lows. Obviously, with on the DAX, I have a potential trade down at this level. So it is a level. I've got to account for that and place the trade based on my strategy. So we'll see. So there's the overall picture versus trading your particular strategy if you get the strategy set up. But as I've said, as an overall, I'm all about watching these lows, and there they are on the daily with the alert. So are we going to hold up here and start to creep back up to the 50, possibly get a close above it? Or are we going to test for a third time? And obviously, the more times we test these lows on a daily basis, especially if we test off a lower high, a bit like that, the potential is greater for a break of those lows. So that's where we are really with the S&P and the Dow, and also the DAX. Just looking at oil in terms of oil. Oil's had a move down. So oil's really reflected that similar scenario. We got close. What do we get up to? Nearly here on the futures, we got 66, nearly $67 a barrel. And the daily chart, not quite as severe, but we have had a close below the daily 50. So oil is pushing quite hard here. And I'll just pop a trend line on the weekly so we can see weekly trend line. A little bit further away there, you can see it. I've just cut through there, but there's roughly the weekly trend line. So really, we've got the weekly trend line. We've got a little bit of support here. We've got the pivot. So again, will oil hold up? Will oil want to go a little bit lower? If it got down here, we will have some potential reversal trades based on our strategies. But if we got down there, from an overall perspective, are we going to break? If we break, then I would be looking further down and a test to that daily 200 and the prior highs down there. So that's really my thoughts. Watch the lows on the Dow and the S&P. Watch the lows on the DAX, and keep an eye on this trend line on oil. So that's all I'm going to cover this week.